Hello, I'm Dowie and welcome to this video. Today we're going to talk about a wealth tax. Now, why a wealth tax now? It's not an original idea, but there is a conversation going around in politics at the moment about if this is a good idea. So, as someone who's worked in asset management in the City of London, I wanted to give you my perspective, dig into the data a bit, and hopefully help your understanding if you can evaluate if this is a policy that you want to support or not. First of all, it's important to note that this proposed plan is about taxing wealth, not work. So if you own a pension or your home, you're a lawyer or a doctor, you shouldn't be worried. This is not trying to disincentivize these experienced professionals that we need in our society, but to address wealth inequality. But why do we need to address wealth inequality? It's been a problem forever, right? Well, you are right, but to an extent. The Office of National Statistics have recently published data suggesting that the top 1% of households here in the UK now own more wealth than the bottom 70% of households combined. So the scale really has changed. Since the pandemic, this is no longer a battle between the working class and the millionaires, but the middle class and the billionaires. While the cost of living has been increasing for people like you and me, the government has been slashing aid to the disabled and cutting money towards public infrastructure. The price of assets are at all-time highs. For instance, take a look at this graph of the gold price, a historic store of value. It's at all-time highs this year. Also, you can have a look at Bitcoin, a less historic store of value, also at all-time highs this year. You can also take a look across the pond to America, check out their stock indexes, or the FTSE 100 here in the UK. No matter how you slice the data, asset prices are at the highest valuations they've ever been. So, why is this the case? Well, during the pandemic, the crisis that shut the world economy down, central banks of governments all across the world were trying to stimulate their economies by injecting money into circulation. Essentially, $7 trillion were printed in the US in order to try and get things moving again. While here in the UK, £1 trillion was spent on schemes like furlough or bailing out businesses that would have gone bust. So what has this got to do with wealth inequality? Well, for most people, they would have spent this money on what it was intended to be spent on. Keeping things afloat, keeping their business expenses up, paying for food, or whatever else they needed to. But for the ultra-rich, they had no choice but to invest this money, and that's led to these valuations of asset prices. Now, some people would argue that high asset prices aren't necessarily a bad thing. And while that is true, a lot of people hold this opinion because they're homeowners. They have an asset that's appreciated in value. But what people don't typically understand is that homes aren't just financial assets. Everyone needs to live somewhere, right? And if they were to sell that home in order to access that liquidity, they would then have to pay the high prices of other housing costs, meaning that in real terms over the last 30 years or so, most people's inflation-adjusted wealth is lower than it was. Besides one quartile, the highest 1%. My main point here is that there's never been such a large incentive to address this issue. The scale of this problem is enormous, and it's increasing in size day by day at a faster and faster rate. As the saying goes, money makes money, right? So, how does our current system deal with this? And how might a wealth tax be introduced? Well, our current system taxes us on two main things. Our spending, through VAT tax, and what we earn, through income tax. And it's really bad at tackling accumulated wealth. And with an ever-growing list of government spending on things like the military, the NHS, our care system, potentially environmental concerns, or even, God forbid, upgrading our infrastructure, we're going to need to raise more revenue as a country. So the question here becomes, are we going to do it through these traditional means? And if you ask me, or you ask many economists like me, we can't afford this. Households are under pressure, and putting up income taxes is just not going to help. So this is why people are talking about alternatives. And a wealth tax is one of these alternatives. So how might this look? Well, it could be a simple 2 or 3% annual tax on real assets over £10 million per year. It's really important to note here that with the threshold being this high, it's not going to affect someone's pension pot or if they own a home or not. It's only going to affect a tiny minority of the wealthiest individuals in the country. And while it's such a small fraction of the population, some studies have suggested that this could raise tens of billions of pounds for the Exchequer. So, to be fair, let's take a look at a couple of the main arguments against a wealth tax in order to understand what the downsides might be. So the first one that you often hear is capital flight. That people are going to leave the country for somewhere like Dubai or the Cayman Islands with a lower threshold. And while this is a real risk, I do think it's often overstated. A simple 1% or 2% tax that's implemented well is not a large enough incentive for someone to uproot their family, their business, networks, and anything else that they have going on here in the UK. And to be perfectly frank, someone who would make that decision probably already has. I think it's also interesting to think about here that the big employers of the country, the people who are going to invest that money back into the economy, wouldn't likely leave, right? Someone who's sitting on their wealth, maybe, yeah, it makes sense for them to go. But someone who's actively pursuing a business, investing in land or culture or anything here in the UK, probably wouldn't make that decision to go. So anyone who would leave probably won't affect the economy that badly. The second counter-argument is that it's too complex to administer. How do you evaluate the valuation of all fine art or private businesses in the whole country? It is challenging, but I think that's a lack of faith and confidence in our institutions. HMRC are well adapted to come after me or you if we get a penny wrong on our tax returns. I don't think that a technical capability should be limiting our policies here. I think it's a challenge of political will more than anything else. So overall, my judgment as someone who's worked in asset management firms in London, but also was raised here in Cornwall by a single mother on benefits, is that this is a question about what kind of society we want to live in. One where hard work pays off, or one where owning assets is the best vehicle towards financial stability. I'm so confident in this view that I'm willing to make a prediction, and I've placed trades in favour of this view. Essentially, if there's no wealth tax introduced, then I believe the middle class is continue to be squeezed, asset prices continue to rise, and unemployment rates start to spike. But I am open-minded and would love to understand what your views on this topic were. If you're for or against, let me know in the comments. You can email me at parentservices@protonmail.com, or you can visit my website at parentservices.com. Thanks for taking your time to spend with me, and I hope this was helpful towards your understanding.